Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Chevy with MNNMMANEWS.com, and I am here with a guy that you probably don't know, but that you probably definitely should know. Paul, the gentleman Bradley of the Minnesota Martial Arts Academy. Paul, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
I really appreciate you coming out here and seeing me. I know that you're a really busy guy. You've got a big fight coming up, but the most interesting thing I think about you, and I mean this could be a half-hour-long interview because there's a lot to talk about, but I'm going to keep it short. The most interesting thing is when people talk about the big-time Minnesota fighters. You got the short list: Sean Shirk, Nick the Goat Thompson, Jake Volkman, Nick Lentz, Brock Larson, Brock Lesnar. No Paul Bradley. And my first question is, really, why do you think that is?
I spent most of my career kind of jumping around for the first 4 years probably, so I didn't really have a home base. I'm originally from Iowa, but I was in Indiana for a year. That's where I started my career. Then I was in New York for a year, training out there. Then I was in Pennsylvania for another year. So I'm not really familiar with the Minnesota people. So this is the longest place I've been and trained for around 2 years now. So I think I'm starting to get a little more acquainted with the fans, but at the same time I'm still kind of that little hidden gem, that no one knows about. So I've only fought in Minnesota once too, and that was at the Target Center show, CFX, back in December. So this is my second time fighting in Minneapolis. So I haven't really been to the area a lot. So fighting around a lot in the country. So kind of stayed a little hidden.
Yeah, it is. It's tough because a lot of those guys I just mentioned, they started out fighting on the local scene for the local promotions. And we're able to move up that way. You're a guy who came here from Iowa, and so that's one of those things. Plus, of course, the Target Center show in December, biggest snowstorm in Minnesota history.
Right.
500 people show up. You dominate your fight, but you don't get to do it in front of the crowd you really deserve. It's going to be a totally different story this time. From what I understand, they're probably going to sell out. So the fans will definitely get a chance to know you now. You are an Iowa wrestler, Big Ten, best wrestling, arguably the best wrestling conference in the NCAA, two-time NCAA champion. What was it that motivated you to go from being a wrestler to actually being a fighter?
I think it's a smooth transition for us. Not a lot of money in Olympic wrestling. The top guy on the Olympic ladder I think only makes like $1,500 a month from USA Wrestling. So there's not a lot of motivation in it. To be dead honest, I mean, those guys train their day in, day out, 365 days a year, and even to win a gold medal, I think it's went up now that they have the gold medal fund thing. But before, I know it was like $50,000 to win a gold medal, 40 to win silver, and 30 to win to win bronze, and that's in the Olympics. That's the biggest stage in the world. And then you got guys. You're looking over here at this guy in the UFC who's he's a subpar fighter and he's making $20,000, $30,000 a fight. It's like, well, you do the math, So, I just I saw these good wrestlers doing very well in it, and kind of thought, hey, that'd be a great avenue for me to keep competing. At the same time, I still had the drive, but at the same time, the Olympic wrestling really wasn't for me. So.
Well, and you're one of these guys who's pretty good at punching people in the face too, and that's one of those things you can't really get away with in the Olympics. So. Yeah. That would work well for you. Now, that kind of brings me to my next question. You got into fighting. Like you said, you traveled around quite a bit. What actually brought you to the Minnesota scene? I mean, you've got some great teams around the country. There's all the big ones in California, the Cesar Gracies, guys like that. Then you've got Hackman in the Pit. Then you go to New Mexico. You've got, of course, Greg Jackson, maybe the most famous trainer in MMA. Then you've got, like Randy Couture and those guys in Vegas. What was it that brought you here to Minnesota specifically?
Well, it was either between here and the Militich camp. I was thinking, obviously I'm from Iowa. I was at a gym called, Lionheart MMA. Actually, me and Phil Davis started there. That's where Phil started. And we were there for a year, and I kind of saw the gym slowly going under. So we were spending more time on the road training than we were at our actual gym, so I kind of started seeing that as a problem, going for a month here, a month there. Went out to San Diego, trained, liked it, but then came back, and for my next fight I came out here and trained for a month, and kind of got my butt whooped a little bit and kind of realized, you know, well, Greg Nelson, he's one of the best coaches in the world, and hey, he's right in my backyard of where I'm from. So 4 hours away from home now, a little better than 17 as well. So it was kind of just one of those things where I looked at the stats here and the in-house champions. You got Brock Lesnar, who came from this gym, Dave Monet, and Sean Shirk. These are all homegrown. You look at Greg Jackson's gym. Come on, GSP. Do you think he was a product of there? You got Joe Stevenson, who all these guys are just coming to the Mecca, which is good, but at the same time, they weren't homegrown, like I said, like Dave Monet and Brock Lesnar and Sean Shirk. These guys were all molded at the academy and all became UFC champions. So I think the accolades speak for themselves, and that's kind of how I ended up here. And I met Greg, and the guy let me stay in his basement for a whole month to train, and that was the end of the story. So moved closer to home and brought my girlfriend, and, you know, packed up everything from Pennsylvania and drove 17 hours out here. So.
It is an amazing story. I mean, you know, you talk about the accolades of this gym, the pedigree, the degree, the level of the fighters that are here. You know, all those things, I mean, are very true. You look at all the success this gym has had. Now, you know, you're a guy who dominated, you know, for the first part of your career. You fought for some of the biggest promotions in the world. You've had some great success. You know, sometimes I like to think of you as the bad luck kid because, of course, a lot of people know you got an opportunity to go on The Ultimate Fighter, Griffin versus Jackson. You got to be on Team Rampage. You win your first fight to get on the show. Third episode, because of a contagious skin thing, you end up having to leave the show. How disappointing was that for you to have to leave?
It's very disappointing, but at the same time, I look back at it with, you know, kind of like a grain of salt. I totally wasn't ready to be in the UFC back then. I was a pure wrestler. You know, I had okay striking, but it was nothing where it needed to be. I wasn't very well rounded, and obviously you could tell from my first fight in the house, or to get in the house. It really was like a growing experience for me. You know, at the time I was bitter, I was mad, I was pissed. I went and signed with Elite XC, who ended up folding anyways, but you know, it gave me the opportunity to move to a place and decide whether or not I wanted to do this thing full time, because I had given up my job. So, you know, I moved to Pennsylvania. I met my girlfriend of 3 years, you know. Would have never met her had I been on the show and not even moved, you know. So it's kind of weird how the things work out.
Well, that and I mean, you were on the show as a middleweight.
Yep.
And, you know, after taking the loss in Strikeforce to Luke Rockhold, you had said you don't belong as a middleweight. You are truly a welterweight. Now, the thing is, you are about the biggest welterweight I think I've ever seen. I mean, you know, Brock's a pretty big guy, you know, Jeremy Lang, but you are a huge welterweight. So is that another thing that you know, are glad about that happened? You know, rather than being a middleweight in the UFC, you can now be a welterweight and get your way in?
Well, you know, I'd always thought about welterweight, and it was always kind of, I always thought I could maybe make it, maybe not. I hadn't weighed that since high school, but the thing about it was, you know, even if I had entered the UFC as a middleweight, I could always drop down. But, you know, I'll still fight middleweight, but it's got to be the right fight. Welterweight's where I belong. I'm obviously very short anyway, so fighting guys like Luke Rockhold, who are 6'3", 6'4", I mean, it's quite a disadvantage as far as the striking department goes.
Yeah, they got a 4, 5, 6 inch reach advantage. It's pretty tough.
So, you know, I belong at welterweight. I can compete with the best guys at welterweight. Middleweight, if there's some intriguing matchups there, I'm like anyone else and the money's there, I'll go up. But at the same time, I belong at welterweight until I establish myself at that weight. That's where I need to be.
Now, on July 23rd, you're going to be fighting for Extreme Challenge 188. It's going to be at the Target Center in downtown Minneapolis. It's a big fight for you. You were able to dominate, you know, in your last fight against a very tough opponent, but, you know, like I said, the crowd wasn't there. This time the crowd's going to be there. People are going to get a chance to know Paul Bradley. You're going to be fighting Robbie Gautreau. He is a guy who's very similar as far as the matchup goes. You know, you were an Iowa wrestler. He's an Augsburg wrestler. But the thing is, even though it's not a Division I NCAA school, it's one of the best wrestling schools in the country. Some of the best fighters around come from Augsburg. What do you see happening when you go toe-to-toe with Robbie on July 23rd? What are your advantages that you have over him?
I think definitely if you look at all my fights, the Nate Coy fight, the Mike Pierce fight, these are guys that were both really good wrestlers, and I negated their takedowns. Therefore, I made them stand with me, which plays right into my game because I believe, as far as a wrestler, I'm pretty well developed for the striking. Obviously, if I'm fighting a striker, I kind of want to stay away from their striking, but I think you can expect some fireworks. I think you can expect a little stand-up exchange because obviously we're going to have trouble taking each other down. But, if I see the takedown, I'll take it, but at the same time, I like to give people a show, and if I'm getting the better of the exchanges, that's where I'll keep it.
Okay, so, and it's an exciting fight. Two great schools, the academy, of course, and then he's with American Top Team, Savage. Two great guys, both similar records. He's 8-1, you're 15-2. So it's a really exciting matchup. My last thing is, and like I said, I really want the fans to be able to get to know you because you should be up there with shirking those guys all over the walls. When you win this next fight on July 23rd, and you get to that point, what do you want next for yourself? Where are you looking to go as a fighter? I mean, it
sounds cliche, and I kind of already had a little bit of an opportunity, but the fight kind of slipped through my fingers. But definitely, it's gonna probably be to the UFC. Like I said, I got a call on short notice to be on the Versus card about 2 weeks ago in Pittsburgh, and one of the opponents, actually Charlie Brenham, and his opponent fell out with pneumonia, and this was before the Nate Marquardt incident even came through. They asked me if I'd take the fight on 4 days' notice. I said absolutely. I didn't even ask for a weight allowance, and it was even better when the UFC came back to me and said they were going to give me 5 pounds. I came back, I'm like, I'm in 100%, and his camp turned the fight down for reasons I don't know, and by some act of God, Marquardt fell out and Brenneman moved up. So the UFC came back to my manager and they said, that's awesome that Paul would take the fight on that short notice. We know he wants to be in there. So they said they'd probably get me in. They don't know when, but it's just, they don't have a time frame. So obviously I have to put on a dominant performance at Target Center, and I have to be solid and show good technique and all that good stuff. But after that, I guess it's hopefully back to the UFC.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, you look at it like maybe the Minnesota fans don't know who you are, but if UFC fighters are ducking you, then they definitely know who you are, and everybody else should soon. Well, Paul, I know you're a busy guy. I got to get out of your hair so you can get back to training for the 23rd, but really, this is a huge pleasure for me. I really appreciate you seeing us. Ladies and gentlemen, again, Paul the Gentleman Bradley. I can see where he gets his nickname from. He's going to be fighting July 23rd at the Target Center in Minneapolis for Extreme Challenge 188. You're going to want to come out. You're definitely going to want to see the show. We got Brock Larson headlining the card, some of the best fighters in Minnesota. Again, from Minnesota MMA News, I'm Chevy. Thanks for tuning in. Don't do anything I would do. Peace. We're out of here.